I found my late wife's apple pie recipe for sale online for $9.99. My daughter-in-law was the seller. She'd taken a photo of Evelyn's handwritten card, the one stained with vanilla and cinnamon, and built an entire digital cookbook around it. What she never bothered to check was the small publishing company my wife quietly formed 12 years ago. Every recipe was already registered property. Evelyn was my wife of 41 years. Her recipes weren't just instructions, they were stories, a chronicle of our family baked into flour and butter. To see them packaged and sold without a thought felt like a second loss. But this wasn't just about sentiment. Under U.S. copyright law, she had built something that belonged to us, and I was about to discover how far someone would go to take it. Evelyn started writing her recipes down in the spring of 1978, the year we bought our first house. She was 24. I was 25. We had a yellow Formica kitchen counter and a budget that meant eating out was a twice-a-year event. So she taught herself to cook, not from books, but from memory, from phone calls to her grandmother in Tennessee, from trial and error that sometimes filled our tiny kitchen with smoke. Every success, every dish that made us close our eyes and smile, she wrote down on a 3x5 index card. She wrote in this beautiful, looping cursive, and she always noted the occasion. Frank's promotion lamb chops, first snow day of '82 beef stew, Daniel's first birthday smash cake. That last one had a smear of chocolate frosting right next to the word vanilla. That was Evelyn. The recipes were never just food, they were our calendar. She filled 2 wooden recipe boxes over 41 years. The cards grew stained with butter and olive oil, the corners softened from use. They were our family's scripture. When our son, Daniel, moved out, she copied his favorites into a notebook for him. When our grandson was born, she baked the same lemon bars her mother made for her. It was her language of love. But here's something most people didn't know about my wife. Beneath that warm, flour-dusted exterior was a remarkably shrewd business mind. She'd been a bookkeeper before we had Daniel, and she never fully turned that part of herself off. In 2009, after a friend of hers had a recipe published in a magazine without credit or payment, Evelyn got quietly furious. She spent a week researching at the library. Then she came to me and said, "I'm forming a company." I thought she meant a catering side business. She didn't. She formed an LLC, a limited liability company called Hearthstone Manuscripts. The filing cost us $300. I remember asking what it was for. She tapped her recipe box. "This is intellectual property, Frank. Maybe not every single card, but the collection as a whole. The way I write it, the stories. If I ever put this in a book, no one gets to just take it." She registered the business with the state, got an EIN from the IRS, and opened a separate checking account with a $200 deposit. Then she filed a copyright registration for a compendium titled The Hearthstone Collection, A Life in Recipes. She submitted a sample of 50 recipes, each with her detailed narrative headnotes. The certificate arrived 6 months later. She framed it and hung it in her pantry. To everyone else, it was a quaint hobby. To her, it was a title deed. Evelyn passed away 4 years ago, ovarian cancer. It was not sudden, but it was brutal, and it took the brightest part of my world. In the aftermath, you cling to rituals. I kept the recipe box on the kitchen counter. Sometimes, on a bad day, I'd just open it and smell the cards. Cinnamon, clove, the faintest trace of her perfume. It was a tangible piece of her I could hold. Daniel was 32 when she died. He took it hard, but he had his own life an hour away in the city. He'd married Chloe 2 years before. Chloe was ambitious. She worked in social media marketing, all about personal branding and digital footprints. She was always cheerful, always filming things, turning moments into content. I thought it was a generational thing. I didn't think much of it. About 6 months after the funeral, Chloe asked if she could digitize Evelyn's recipes. She said it would be a beautiful way to preserve them, and she could make a lovely book for the family. I was touched. It felt like a bridge. I said yes. I handed over the 2 boxes, all those fragile cards. Chloe spent a weekend at our house photographing each one with a professional light setup. She was meticulous. She asked me questions about the stories behind some of them, and I talked for hours, my throat tight with memory. I thought I was helping her create a tribute. For months, nothing. Whenever I asked, Chloe said she was designing the layout or waiting for the right publishing platform. Life moved on. I had my grief, my empty house, my weekly dinners with Daniel. Then one evening last October, I was having coffee with my old friend Martin. His granddaughter was visiting, showing him something on her laptop. She was a foodie, she said. She pulled up a site called Artisanal Plate. It was a subscription-based recipe hub. She clicked on a featured collection. The Heritage Kitchen by Chloe Barlow, my daughter-in-law's maiden name. And there, centered on the screen, was a beautifully filtered photo of Evelyn's vanilla-stained apple pie card. The recipe was listed for subscribers, or for a one-time fee of $9.99, you could buy the Heritage Kitchen ebook. My stomach dropped through the floor. I asked the girl to scroll. There was Frank's promotion lamb chops. There was First Snow Day stew. Over 120 recipes, all of them Evelyn, all of them for sale. Chloe had written short introductions, but they were paraphrases of the stories I'd told her. The core of every recipe, the specific wording, the precise ratios Evelyn had spent decades perfecting, were there. I made an excuse, went home, and found the site myself. The Heritage Kitchen had over 2,000 subscribers at $12 a month. The ebook had sold 487 copies. I did the math in my head on a notepad. The rough revenue made me physically dizzy. She had monetized my wife's life's work, and she had never mentioned a single word of it to me. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I called Daniel. I tried to be calm. I told him I'd found his wife's website and that she was selling his mother's recipes. There was a long silence. Then he said, "Oh, that. Yes, she launched that a few months back. It's just a little side project, Dad. She wanted it to be a surprise. A surprise." I asked if Evelyn's LLC Hearthstone Manuscripts was listed as the copyright holder. Another silence. "What LLC?" he asked. I drove to my safe deposit box the same day. I pulled out the file, the state registration for Hearthstone Manuscripts, the IRS letter, the copyright certificate from the Library of Congress. The copyright was in the name of the LLC, and because I had never formally dissolved the company after Evelyn's death, as the surviving spouse and sole inheritor of our assets, control of that LLC and all its intellectual property passed to me. Chloe was selling something she did not own. I decided to handle it as family. I invited Daniel and Chloe for dinner that Sunday. I made Evelyn's pot roast, the one from the blue index card. The meal was tense. Daniel wouldn't meet my eyes. Chloe was all bright, forced smiles. After dessert, I slid the folder across the table. I showed them the copyright certificate. I explained that while individual recipe ingredients can't be copyrighted, a compiled collection with creative expression can be. Evelyn's narratives, the specific arrangement, the entire Hearthstone collection was protected, and it belonged to her company, which now belonged to me. Chloe's smile didn't fade. It just hardened at the edges. "Frank," she said, "I've transformed these. I've curated them. I've built a brand. This is my sweat equity. This is fair use." I told her that fair use is a legal defense for commentary or parody, not for repackaging and selling someone's entire copyrighted work. I said I wanted the website taken down immediately, and all revenue from sales of Evelyn's work accounted for and transferred. I said we could then discuss a proper licensing agreement, with terms. She laughed, not a mean laugh, but the laugh of someone who thinks you're being adorable and obsolete. "You're going to sue your own family over some old recipes. Come on, Frank, this is the digital age. Everything is a remix." She looked at Daniel. He was staring at his hands. "Dan, tell him." Daniel finally looked up, his face pained. "Dad, maybe there's a way to share this. Chloe has put so much work into it." In that moment, I didn't see my son. I saw a man choosing the path of least resistance, standing on the blueprint of his mother's life. I gave them a week, 1 week to take it down and provide the accounting. Chloe left angry. Daniel left looking broken. The week passed. Not only was the site still up, but Chloe had added a new banner. "The legacy continues, over 100 heirloom recipes." She had also, I discovered, filed for her own trademark on the phrase "the Heritage Kitchen." That's when I called Susan Park, the attorney who had helped me years before with a property matter. I sent her all the documents. She reviewed them and was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "This is a clear case of copyright infringement. The registration is valid and predates her site by over a decade. But Frank, I need to ask you something. Are you prepared for what this means? She's not going to back down. This will get ugly." I told her I was prepared. I believed that. I had no idea what ugly truly meant. Because 3 days later, I received an email from a law firm I did not recognize. The subject line was, "Cease and desist." It wasn't from me to Chloe. It was from a lawyer named David Ross, representing Chloe Barlow. The letter stated that I was making fraudulent claims of ownership to harass her legitimate business. It claimed that recipes are not copyrightable, that her work was transformative, and that my threats constituted tortious interference. It demanded that I immediately sign over any purported rights to the recipes to Chloe, and that I issue a public retraction of my claims. If I did not comply within 48 hours, they would sue me for defamation and seek damages for lost business income. They had struck first, and they were coming for everything, including the copyright itself. I read their letter 3 times. The audacity was breathtaking. They weren't just denying the infringement, they were accusing me of being the criminal. Susan Park, my attorney, was calm when I forwarded it to her. "Standard intimidation tactic," she said. "They want you to fold before you even start. We don't fold." Her strategy was twofold. First, we would not respond to their letter at all. Silence. Second, we would file our own lawsuit in federal court for copyright infringement. We weren't playing defense. We were taking the offensive on the strongest possible ground. Susan explained that because Evelyn's work was registered before the infringement, we could seek statutory damages, up to $150,000 per work infringed, instead of just the actual profits Chloe had made. The math was staggering. Over 120 recipes. The potential liability was in the millions. I told Susan I didn't want to bankrupt my son's family. I just wanted it to stop. She said, "The threat of that liability is what will make it stop. It's the leverage." While Susan drafted the federal complaint, the family war went quiet. No calls from Daniel, no emails from Chloe. It was a tense, artificial peace. I busied myself with something Evelyn had always meant to do. I digitized the recipe cards myself properly. I scanned each one at a high resolution, preserving every stain and smudge. I typed out her exact words, her stories. I was rebuilding the archive she had legally created, brick by digital brick. It felt like honoring her in the way she would have wanted. I was so focused on this act of preservation that I almost missed the first shot fired in the public relations battle. Friend of mine, Brenda, called me one Tuesday morning. Her voice was hesitant. "Frank, are you on that Viewpoint app?" I wasn't. "Well," she said, "I think you should take a look. Chloe is, and she's talking." I downloaded the app. It took me 10 minutes to figure it out, and there she was, Chloe Barlow, a verified profile. Her bio read, "Digital storyteller, preserving family heritage, founder of the Heritage Kitchen." She had over 50,000 followers. Her most recent post was a video. She was sitting in what looked like a bright, modern kitchen. Not hers, I realized later, probably a rented studio. She spoke directly to the camera, her eyes wide with sincere distress. "Hey everyone," she began. "So, I need to talk about something really personal and really painful. As you know, the Heritage Kitchen is my heart. It's my mission to preserve and share the food stories that connect us. Recently, someone very close to my family has decided to claim ownership of these generational recipes. They're using legal threats to try and take this project away, a project built with so much love and hard work. It's a blatant attempt to exploit a legacy for personal gain. I just believe that food memory should belong to everyone, not be locked away by one person. I'm heartbroken, but I won't stop. Your support means everything." The comments were a tidal wave of outrage. "Who does this? This is elder abuse in reverse. Stay strong, Chloe. Protect our heritage." She had framed the narrative perfectly. I was the greedy, controlling old man, hoarding recipes like a dragon hoards gold. She was the heroic digital archivist fighting to free them for the people. She hadn't named me, but to anyone in our circle it was obvious. The 48-hour deadline in her lawyer's letter passed. We did nothing. Our lawsuit was filed in the U.S. District Court the next day. Being a federal case, it was a matter of public record. A legal news blogger picked it up. The headline was dry: Hearthstone Manuscripts LLC v. Chloe Barlow, copyright dispute over recipe compilation. But once that case number was out there, Chloe's narrative found rocket fuel. Her next video was titled The Bunker Mentality. She cried, real tears on camera. She talked about the cold corporate LLC that was suing her. She never mentioned it was my wife, or that I was her father-in-law. The omission was a weapon. Her followers filled in the blanks with a villain of their own imagining, a faceless, predatory company. Donations started flowing into a legal defense fund linked in her profile. She raised $20,000 in 4 days. The story was now a cause. Then Daniel called. It had been 3 weeks since our dinner. He didn't say hello. He just said, "Dad, you filed a federal lawsuit." His voice was flat, hollow. I said yes, that it was the necessary response to their legal threat. He let out a short, bitter laugh. "Necessary? You're suing my wife for everything we have. You've seen her posts. Do you have any idea what this is doing to her, to us?" I told him I had seen them. I told him they were lies by omission. "She's protecting herself." He shouted, and the sound of my son yelling at me, something he hadn't done since he was a teenager, felt like a physical blow. "From what, Daniel? From being asked to respect your mother's work, from sharing the profits she made from it." He went quiet. Then he said the words that changed the axis of the conflict. "She's pregnant, Dad." The air left the room. I sat down hard on my kitchen chair, the one Evelyn always sat in. "What? 8 weeks," he said, his voice cracking. "We were going to tell you this weekend, but now with the lawsuit, how can I bring a child into this war?" He was crying. My son was crying on the phone, and all I could think was that Evelyn would never know her grandchild. The injustice of that, layered on top of everything else, was a weight I couldn't bear. But then a colder, harder thought followed. Was this a tactic? An emotional trump card played at the precise moment the legal pressure mounted? I hated myself for thinking it, but I couldn't unthink it. "Daniel," I said, my own voice rough. "That's wonderful news, truly. But the baby doesn't change the law. It doesn't change what Chloe did." "You're choosing recipes over your own grandchild," he whispered, and then he hung up. I didn't sleep for 2 nights. I wrestled with it. Susan, ever the pragmatist, advised caution. "Emotional leverage is a powerful tool in settlement negotiations, Frank. It doesn't mean the underlying facts have changed." She advised we offer a settlement conference, a way out. We sent the offer through formal channels. The response came not from Chloe's lawyer, but in another video. This one was a live stream. She sat with a cup of tea, looking drained but resolute. "I was served with papers today," she told her audience, now 70,000 strong. "The lawsuit is real, the pressure is immense, and I've just been given an ultimatum: give up my life's work or fight a brutal, expensive legal battle. They've even offered to settle." She made air quotes. "But here's my ultimatum back. I will not negotiate with someone who uses the law to bully family. This isn't about money anymore. It's about principle. I will fight this to the very end, for every creator who's been told their voice doesn't matter." The donations poured in again. She was martyring herself on a cross of her own making, and her audience was buying the nails. The next development was more insidious. I started getting friend requests on social media from people I didn't know. Then messages: "Shame on you. Let the recipes go, old man. You're a monster." My email inbox filled with spam and vile comments. Someone found my address not hard. I'd lived in the same house for 40 years, and I began receiving letters. Most were just printed out comments from Chloe's posts, but one included a photo of my house, taken from the street. The message read, "Food should be free. Stop being a selfish prick." I called the police. They took a report but said without an explicit threat of violence, it was just harassment, hard to trace. I felt a chill I hadn't felt since the night Daniel and Chloe showed up at my door. This was different. This was a faceless digital mob, and she had unleashed it. Susan escalated our legal strategy. We subpoenaed the records from Artisanal Plate, the recipe platform. We needed the full financial picture, subscriber counts, ebook sales, revenue. The platform, wanting to avoid liability, complied quickly. The numbers were worse than I'd estimated. In just under a year, the Heritage Kitchen had generated gross revenue of $218,000. After the platform's cut, Chloe had netted over $150,000. This wasn't a side project. It was a thriving business, built entirely on Evelyn's intellectual property. Susan also filed a motion for a preliminary injunction, a court order to force Chloe to take the site down while the lawsuit proceeded. To get it, we had to prove we were likely to win on the merits. This was our first real day in court, even if just a hearing. The hearing was a revelation. Chloe's lawyer, David Ross, argued fervently that recipes were facts, not copyrightable. He said Chloe's photography, her website design, her curation were the transformative creative elements. He painted me as a distant, money-grubbing relative exploiting a technicality. Then Susan stood up. She didn't talk about the recipes as recipes. She talked about the Hearthstone collection as a literary work. She entered into evidence Evelyn's copyright registration certificate. She showed the judge, a stern man named Judge Albright, examples of the original cards next to Chloe's versions. Evelyn's card for Sunday morning brioche read, "The yeast smells like promise." Frank reads the paper at the table and the son makes a square on the floor. "This bread takes time. It teaches patience." Chloe's version began, "A simple, elegant brioche for weekend baking." Susan argued that the heart of the work, the expressive, narrative core, was copied verbatim or paraphrased without license. This wasn't about flour and yeast. It was about the theft of a specific voice, a protected compilation of that voice. Judge Albright took the documents. He peered over his glasses. He asked David Ross a simple question. "Did your client have permission from the copyright holder, Hearthstone Manuscripts LLC, to reproduce and distribute these compilations?" Ross fumbled. He said the copyright claim was disputed, that his client believed the works were not protected. The judge interrupted him. "That is not what I asked. Did she have permission, yes or no?" Ross was forced to admit on record, "No, Your Honor, but she believed." The judge cut him off. "The motion for a preliminary injunction is granted. The defendant is ordered to cease all sale and distribution of the copyrighted compilation known as the Hearthstone Collection within 48 hours. Failure to do so will result in contempt of court." It was a massive victory. The law had spoken, clearly and quickly. We left the courtroom feeling a sense of hard-won justice. It lasted about 6 hours. That evening, Chloe went live again. The video was dark, her face lit only by her laptop screen. She looked devastated. "I have just been ordered by a court to shut down the Heritage Kitchen," she said, her voice trembling. "A project born from love, ordered to die by the law. This is what happens when the system favors corporations over people. But my followers, you are my people. The recipes. The spirit of the recipes, they live on in you. Cook them, share them, keep them alive. This isn't over." She didn't take the site down. Instead, she replaced all the recipes with a single PDF file titled Community Recipe Archive. The file contained the same recipes but with a new disclaimer, shared by the community for the community, original attribution unknown. She made the file free to download. She told her audience to distribute it everywhere, to decentralize the heritage. She had found the loophole. The injunction stopped her from selling it. It didn't stop her from giving it away. And with one move, she turned her paid business into a viral, unstoppable campaign of mass infringement. The recipes were now everywhere, spreading across the internet, completely beyond any control. The legal victory felt hollow. She had set the entire collection free, ensuring neither she nor I would ever profit from it again. And in doing so, she had made a mockery of the copyright we just defended in court. The war was no longer about money or even credit. It was now about annihilation. And that's when I realized we had to dig deeper. We had to find the one thing she couldn't spin, couldn't give away, couldn't fight. We needed to look past the recipes to the foundation of her entire brand. Susan had a forensic accountant on retainer, a woman named Lee who could find a needle in a digital haystack. We hired her. Her mandate was simple: follow the money and audit the brand. Not just the Heritage Kitchen, but everything Chloe Barlow had ever built online. We needed to understand the machine, not just the output. Lee worked silently for a week. Her report arrived as a PDF, 200 pages long. The summary was devastating. The revenue from the recipe site was just the tip of the iceberg. Chloe had monetized the Heritage Kitchen brand across 7 different platforms, sponsored social media posts using the recipes, affiliate links for kitchen equipment, a paid newsletter with exclusive family cooking tips that were, again, paraphrases of Evelyn's notes. She had even pitched a television production company a concept for a show called Rooted, positioning herself as a culinary historian. The total gross revenue across all streams since the site's launch was closer to $380,000. But that wasn't the shock. The shock was in the appendix. Lee had run a plagiarism check on all of Chloe's published content, not just the recipes. She compared it against a database of cookbooks, food blogs, and even old community cookbooks. The results were highlighted in angry red. The heartfelt family stories Chloe told about apple picking with her grandmother, lifted, almost word for word, from a memoir by a chef in Vermont. The anecdote about her gratin soup during the Depression, taken from a documentary transcript. The personal philosophy paragraph on her About page, patched together from 3 different popular lifestyle influencers. The Heritage Kitchen wasn't just built on Evelyn's recipes. Its entire emotional architecture, the very stories that made people trust and donate to Chloe, were stolen. She was a curator of other people's nostalgia, a ghostwriter of a fake past. This changed everything. It wasn't just copyright infringement anymore. This was fraud, a pattern of deliberate, systematic misrepresentation for financial gain. Susan believed we could now make a compelling case for not just statutory damages, but for punitive damages, and possibly a criminal referral for wire fraud, given the interstate nature of the donations and sales. The stakes had just exploded. But Susan warned me, if we go this route, if we expose this, there is no coming back for her, or for your relationship with Daniel. This is a scorched earth move. I held the report for 2 days. I thought about Evelyn. I thought about the sheer, calculated gall of it, building a pedestal for herself using bricks stolen from a dozen different lives, including my wife's. I thought about Daniel, about the baby. I made my decision. I told Susan to amend our lawsuit. We would include the new findings. We would lay it all out. But first, we would offer one final private off-ramp. A settlement so stark, so final, it would be impossible to misunderstand. The terms were this: 1. A public written confession and apology posted to all her platforms, detailing the infringement and the plagiarism. 2. The permanent dissolution of the Heritage Kitchen brand and all associated accounts. 3. The disgorgement of all net profits from the venture, every penny after platform fees, to be paid to the Hearthstone Manuscripts LLC 4, a formal, legally binding agreement never to commercially use Evelyn's recipes or stories again. In return, we would drop the lawsuit. We would not pursue criminal charges. We would not release the forensic report to the public. She could walk away clean if she told the truth and gave back the money. We sent the offer to her lawyer, David Ross. The response was silence for 72 hours. Then we received a counteroffer. It was a single paragraph. It stated that Chloe Barlow denied all allegations of plagiarism and fraud. She offered to pay a one-time licensing fee of $10,000 for past use of the recipes, with no admission of wrongdoing. All other claims were to be dropped. It was an insult. It was a declaration of war. Susan filed the amended complaint the next morning. It was a masterpiece of cold fury. 140 pages detailing not only the copyright infringement but the fraudulent misrepresentation, the willful pattern of plagiarism, the conversion of donated funds under false pretenses. It sought the maximum statutory damages for the copyright claims, plus all profits, plus punitive damages. The total ask was in the high 7 figures. The lawsuit was now a cannon aimed at the heart of her entire digital existence. This time the legal blogger's headline was not dry. It read, "Recipe Rift Turns Toxic. Father-in-law's suit alleges massive fraud in heritage brand." The story got picked up, not by mainstream press but by the insidious, gossipy underbelly of the internet, the same communities that had championed Khloe. The narrative began to curdle. Comments on her videos shifted from "stay strong" to "is any of this real? And we need proof." The doubt was a seed and it grew fast. Khloe went silent for 5 whole days. No posts, no lives, no stories. It was the most telling thing she could have done. Then on a Thursday, Daniel showed up at my door. He looked years older. He didn't ask to come in. He stood on the porch, the autumn wind pulling at his coat. "You're trying to destroy her," he said, his voice empty of emotion. "I'm trying to get her to tell the truth," I said. "The offer is still there. Confess, give back the money, walk away." "She can't confess to something she didn't do," he shouted, the fury finally breaking through. "That report is a lie. You hired someone to fabricate it." I went inside. I came back with a printed copy of the report. I opened it to the appendix, to the side-by-side comparisons of her words and the original sources. I handed it to him. "Page 47, read it." He looked down. His eyes scanned the page. I watched the color drain from his face. He flipped a page, then another. His hands began to shake. This could be coincidence," he stammered, but the conviction was gone from his voice. "It's not," I said gently. "And you know it's not. This is who you married, Daniel. This is who is going to be the mother of your child, a person who builds her life on lies." He threw the pages down on the porch. They scattered in the wind. He got in his car and drove away without another word. I stood there, gathering the papers, feeling a profound and terrible sadness. I had given him the truth, and it had broken something between us that might never be fixed. The following week, we received notice of a court-ordered mediation, a final attempt to settle before a costly, public trial. Both parties were required to attend. It was scheduled for December the 18th. I knew it was the end game. Either she would face reality, or we would see each other in front of a jury. The mediation was held in a bland conference room in a downtown office tower. Susan and I sat on one side. Khloe, Daniel, and David Ross sat on the other. A retired judge acted as the mediator. Khloe refused to look at me. Daniel looked at the table. David Ross opened by accusing us of character assassination. Susan responded by placing 3 thick binders on the table: the full forensic report, the financial analysis, and the plagiarism comparison. She slid one across to the mediator and one to David Ross. "The evidence is not ambiguous," she said. The mediator, an older man with a tired face, spent an hour reading. The room was silent except for the rustle of pages. He closed the binder. He looked at Khloe. "Ms. Barlow," he said, "your legal counsel has advised you of the risks of proceeding to trial." Khloe nodded, her jaw tight. "Given the strength of the documentary evidence here, a jury is very likely to find for the plaintiff. The damages could be catastrophic for you. Personally, I strongly urge you to consider the settlement offer." Khloe finally looked at me. Her eyes were hard, glittering with hatred. "I will not apologize," she said, each word a chip of ice. "I will not be bullied by him. He wants to erase me. Well, I have news. You can't erase me." She stood up. "We're done here." She walked out. Daniel hesitated for a second, a look of utter despair on his face, then he followed her. David Ross gathered his papers, flustered. "We'll see you at trial," he muttered. The path was now clear and horrifying. A public trial. My family's dirty laundry aired in a federal courtroom. My son testifying against me. My daughter-in-law exposed as a fraud. The complete and total destruction of any possibility of reconciliation. As we walked to the elevator, Susan said, "It's the only way left, Frank. We have to see it through." I knew she was right. But as the elevator descended, I felt the ground falling away beneath me. We had won every legal battle, and yet we were marching toward a Pyrrhic victory where everyone, especially my son, would lose. I went home to an empty, quiet house. I sat in Evelyn's chair, and I did the one thing I had avoided for months. I opened the recipe box, not to scan or to evidence, but to remember. I pulled out the card for her chocolate chip cookies. The note said, "For when Daniel skins his knee, 1994. I held it, the paper thin and soft. This was what it was all for, not for money, not for revenge, for the integrity of that simple note, for the truth of it. The trial was set for February. I had 2 months to prepare myself to stand in a courtroom and, in defending my wife's memory, dismantle my son's future. The weight of it was absolute. And then, 3 days before Christmas, an email arrived that changed everything one final time. It was from the U.S. Copyright Office. The subject line was, "Ray, inquiry into derivative work registration." The email was a response to an inquiry Susan had filed months earlier, a procedural check we'd almost forgotten about. In the midst of everything, Susan had asked the Copyright Office a simple question. If the copyright for the Hearthstone collection was held by an LLC and the sole member of that LLC died, was the registration still valid? The answer was yes, absolutely. The copyright lived with the company, but the officer had added a note. They had cross-referenced their records. And they had found something. 3 weeks prior, an application had been filed by one Chloe Barlow to register a copyright for a work titled The Heritage Kitchen, a digital compendium. The application listed her as the author and claimant. It had been submitted shortly after she received our first cease and desist letter. The Copyright Office had flagged it for potential conflict with the existing Hearthstone collection registration. Her application was now on hold pending investigation. Worse for her, in the filing she had checked a box certifying, under penalty of perjury, that the work was original and not derived from any other copyrighted source. She had lied directly to the federal government. Susan printed the email. She held it up. "This," she said, "is checkmate." It was more than just a powerful piece of evidence. It was a potential felony. Submitting a false claim to the Copyright Office could be prosecuted as fraud. Susan believed that with this we could force an immediate surrender, no trial needed. We drafted a short, blunt letter to David Ross. We attached the Copyright Office correspondence. We gave them 48 hours to accept our original settlement terms in full, or we would forward the evidence to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the district, requesting a criminal investigation into the fraudulent registration. We sent it on Christmas Eve. I didn't expect a reply until after the holiday. I was wrong. At 9:15 that night, my phone rang. It was Daniel. His voice was a raw whisper. "She got the letter. She's packing a bag, Dad. She's talking about leaving, about the stress being too much for the pregnancy." There was no anger in him now, just pure, unadulterated fear. "What did you do?" "I showed her the truth, Daniel, and the truth has consequences." I took a breath. "You can come here tonight. You don't have to be in the middle of this." He was quiet for a long time. I could hear him breathing. "I'm in the middle of it," he said finally. "I married her. I believed her. I let her do this. I'm just as guilty." And then he hung up. I didn't hear from him on Christmas. The house was silent, the weight of the holiday a physical pressure. I set 2 places at the table out of habit, then put 1 plate away. At 4 p.m. my doorbell rang. It was Daniel, alone. He looked shattered. He walked in, went straight to the kitchen, and sat at the table. I didn't speak. I poured him a coffee the way he liked it. He held the mug with both hands. "She signed it," he said, not looking up. "The settlement, all of it. Ross brought it over this morning. She signed without even reading it. She just kept saying she needed it to be over." He took a shuddering breath. "Then she handed me her phone, told me to post the apology, that she couldn't look at it. I read it. It was the one your lawyer wrote. It admitted to the copyright infringement. It admitted to taking the recipes without permission. It said the money would be returned. It didn't mention the plagiarism, but it was enough. I posted it on all her accounts. Then I deactivated them, all of them. The Heritage Kitchen is gone." He finally looked at me, his eyes red-rimmed. $147,000, that's the net profit after the platform fees. She has to wire it to your lawyer's trust account by New Year's Eve. We drained our savings to cover it. The donation money is gone. It's all gone. I felt no triumph, only a vast echoing sadness. "And the baby?" I asked. "He's fine, due in June." Daniel's voice broke. "She's staying with her sister. She says she can't look at me. She says I should have protected her from you." I reached across the table and put my hand over his. "You protected her from a federal prison sentence, Daniel. That's what you did." He put his head down on his arms and cried deep, racking sobs that came from a place of utter loss. I sat with him. I didn't try to fix it. There was no fixing this. The money arrived on December the 30th. Susan's firm took their fee, and the remainder was deposited into the Hearthstone Manuscripts LLC account. I signed the paperwork to formally dissolve the company. As a final act, I transferred the copyright for the Hearthstone collection into my own name as Evelyn's heir. The legal war was over. The personal war's aftermath was quieter and slower. Daniel moved into an apartment near his work. He and Chloe were separated. He came over for dinner every other week. We didn't talk about the case. We talked about his job, about the baby, about the weather. It was strained, but it was contact. The bridge was damaged, but it was still standing. In February, I received a notice from the Copyright Office. Chloe Barlow's application for the Heritage Kitchen had been formally rejected due to conflict with an existing registration and evidence of bad faith submission. A permanent note was attached to her file. That chapter was closed. In May, Daniel called me. He asked if I would come to the hospital when the baby was born. He said, "I want you there." It was the first thing he'd asked of me in almost a year that wasn't shadowed by the conflict. I said yes immediately. My granddaughter was born on June the 12th. They named her Evelyn Claire. Daniel called me from the delivery room, his voice thick with tears, but this time they were happy ones. "You can come now, Dad. She's here." I drove to the hospital, my hands trembling on the wheel. When I walked into the room, Chloe was sitting up in bed, holding the baby. She looked exhausted, peaceful, and utterly different. She saw me and gave a small, tentative nod. Daniel stood beside her. "Do you want to hold her?" he asked. I did. I took little Evelyn into my arms. She was so small, so perfect. She had a thatch of dark hair, and as she yawned, I saw it, the same delicate shape of her nose, the one I'd kissed for 41 years. She had her grandmother's nose. I held her close, my cheek against her head, and I cried. For the first time since my wife died, I cried not from grief, but from a love that had somehow, against all odds, threaded its way into the future. Chloe spoke softly from the bed. "Frank," she said, "I am sorry for everything, truly." It wasn't the public confession. It was quieter and I believed it more. I just nodded. What else was there to say? A month later, I did something with the money. I used it to establish a small community grant in Evelyn's name, administered through our local library, the Hearthstone Recipe Legacy Grant. It offers funding to local families who want to professionally preserve and document their own heirloom recipes, including help with proper copyright registration. The first grant was awarded to a woman who wanted to record her mother's Ukrainian recipes before her memory faded. I signed the check myself. It felt like the circle was complete, not locking the recipes away, but teaching others how to protect their own. People ask me if I regret it. The strife, the near loss of my son, the cost. I tell them no. I tell them that copyright law isn't about greed. It's about sovereignty. It's about the fundamental right to say what happens to the things you create. Evelyn knew that. She built a tiny fortress of paper and ink to protect her world. My job was to defend that fortress, not just for her, but for anyone who's ever made something and whispered, "This is mine." Daniel and Chloe are in counseling. They're trying. They bring little Evelyn over on Sundays. Chloe helps in the kitchen now, but it's different. She asks before she touches anything. She listens. We are slowly writing a new recipe for our family, one with clearer measurements. I'm sitting now in Evelyn's rocking chair. The oak tree we planted is bare against the winter sky, but I know its roots are deep. The recipe box is on the table beside me. It's not a relic anymore, it's a living thing. I finally understand what she was really protecting. It wasn't the instructions for a pie. It was the story of the life we built together. And stories, like foundations, only hold if you're willing to fight for their integrity. The law was the tool, but love was the reason. And in the end, that's the only ingredient that ever really matters. So where does that leave us in a world where everything can be copied with a click? This story was never really about a pie recipe. It was about a line in the sand, a line between taking and stealing, between inspiration and appropriation, between a legacy and a looted grave. We live in an age that champions the remix, the mashup, the shared cultural commons, and there is beauty in that. But we've forgotten the companion principle, credit, consent, the simple human courtesy of asking. What Chloe did is happening every single day on a massive scale. Digital creators, artists, writers, musicians, they watch their life's work get scraped, repackaged, and sold by strangers who treat creativity as a free natural resource. The law often struggles to catch up, tangled in debates about fair use and transformation. But the law, in the end, is just a codification of ethics. It's a way of saying, this person's mind made this. Respect that. Evelyn's recipes are still out there, floating in the digital ether, divorced from their stories. That can't be undone. But what was secured was their origin, their truth. The fact that they sprang from the mind and hands of a specific woman, in a specific yellow kitchen, for a specific family. In the endless copy of a copy world, that truth is the last and only thing of real value. If you take anything from this, let it be this: protect what you make. It doesn't require a lawyer or an LLC from the start. It begins with awareness. Take the photo, write down the story, keep the drafts, understand that your creation has weight. Your family recipes, your grandfather's woodworking designs, your poems in a journal, they are not just things. They are extensions of you, and you have a right to decide what happens to them. For the creators watching this, feeling that sinking feeling when you see your work somewhere it shouldn't be, you are not being difficult. You are not being greedy. You are defending a piece of your own sovereignty. The system can be daunting, but the first step is always to claim what is yours, out loud and on paper. And for everyone else, the next time you come across a beautiful recipe, a haunting melody, a perfect turn of phrase online, pause. Look for the source. Ask who made it. Because behind every beautiful thing is a person. And that connection, that acknowledgement, is what turns a commodity back into a gift. Our story here is done. The kitchen is quiet. The chair rocks gently by the window. A new generation is sleeping in the next room, her nose a perfect echo of the past. The foundation held. May yours hold just as strong. Thank you for listening.